Hi, I'm Jenna. My life, pretty much like my coding, was streamlined, efficient, logical. I worked as a website developer for a big IT corporation. Every day was a new puzzle, figuring out how to make shopping online as easy as breathing for people who'd probably never meet me. Everything was ticking along just fine until they shuffled me off to a different branch to help jumpstart a sluggish project. That's where I bumped into Alex. Now, let me tell you about Alex. He was like a whirlwind, always buzzing around, full of ideas, and always ready to grab everyone's attention in the room. I remember the first time we really talked. It was by the coffee machine, that old sputtering beast that was the unofficial meeting spot in the office. I was trying to figure out why it hated me when he sauntered over. Struggling? He had this smirk, like he knew exactly how annoying that machine was. Yeah, this thing is a beast, I replied, smacking it lightly. They say you gotta sweet-talk it, Alex said, winking. He picked up the sugar packets, shaking them like he was about to perform a magic trick. Or bribe it. Finally, coffee machine hissed and sputtered out my much-needed coffee. We laughed, and that's how it started. Simple. Over cups of terrible coffee, we started chatting about work, then movies, music, and everything in between. Alex wasn't just talk, though. The guy had ambition that could light up a city. He was in software development, always juggling half a dozen projects, each more complex than the last. A few weeks in, he asked me out. Not in a sweet, shy way. Oh no, Alex wasn't about that. So, Jenna, when are you gonna let me take you out? I promise an evening not as bitter as this office coffee, he'd thrown down, grinning over his mug. Dating him was a whirlwind. He was passionate, always pushing boundaries, making plans. We hit off so well that when it was time for me to head back to my old department, the thought of not seeing him every day was a downer. But we made it work. Long calls, weekend visits, and constant messaging filled the gaps until he proposed a year later. It was as direct as our first date invite. I laughed, cried a bit, and said yes. Soon, I met Alex's mother, Judith, a warm and inviting woman who welcomed me with open arms. Our connection was instant, bonded over Sunday dinners and shared stories of Alex as a cheeky child. The wedding was modest but beautiful, held in a small garden with our closest friends and family. It was perfect, filled with laughter, good food, and dancing under string lights. After our wedding, Alex moved into my apartment. It felt like the start of something wonderful, with every evening a chance to dream together. Life with Alex was never dull. We'd spend our weekdays buried in work, me at my corporation, and him at his buzzing tech startup. When the weekend rolled around, we'd switch off our work modes. Sometimes, we'd just kick back at home, or we'd head over to his mom's place. It was on one of those lazy Sunday afternoons at Judith's, when Alex first brought up his big idea. We were lounging in her sunlit living room, Judith fussing around with some tea and cookies. Mom, Jenna, I've been thinking, Alex began, his eyes lighting up the way they did when he was onto something big. What if we started our own thing? A platform for manufacturers to sell their products directly to customers. I remember looking over at Judith, who just shrugged as if to say, "He's your husband, you deal with it." Alex, that sounds huge, I said, trying to keep my voice light. But starting something like that from scratch? It's a lot of money, a lot of risk. But think about the potential, Jen. We could build something amazing, all our own, he pressed, his enthusiasm bubbling over. I loved his passion, really, I did. But practicality was screaming in my ear. I know, love, but we need a solid plan. It's not just about having the idea, it's about making it work financially. Judith nodded, handing us our tea with a cautious smile. Alex leaned forward, his hands animated as he spoke. I've already looked into it. We can take out a loan, get started with a small team. I've even got some contacts ready to jump on board as soon as we say go. I took a deep breath, the weight of his expectations pressing down on me. Alex, starting a business on a loan is risky. What if it doesn't pan out? We'd be left with nothing but debt. Judith put a comforting hand on my shoulder, giving me a supportive squeeze. Alex shook his head, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. Sometimes you gotta take risks, Jen. No guts, no glory, right? I tried a different angle, hoping to get through to him. Look at all the successful platforms we know. They were built by teams, by corporations with deep pockets. We're just two people. But that's how the big players started, babe. In garages, at kitchen tables. We could be like them, and we don't have to quit our jobs right away. I'll go first, get it off the ground. The conversation went round in circles for hours. In the end, Alex did what he always did when he had set his mind on something. He charged ahead. The next thing I knew, he'd quit his job, taken out a loan, and rented a small office space. He was all in, expecting me to follow. When he told me what he'd done, my heart sank. Alex, this is too fast. We should have planned more, saved more. He was unpacking a box of his belongings in the new office, not even looking at me as he spoke. I thought you'd be happy, Jen. I thought you'd be proud. Despite his confidence, I didn't quit my job. I couldn't. The thought of both of us floating without a safety net was terrifying. Alex saw it as distrust, a lack of faith in his vision. I saw it as being the only thing that might keep us from drowning. Alex's new office was buzzing with activity by the time I swung by one evening after my own long day at work. He'd rented a sleek, glass-fronted space downtown, filled it with the latest tech, and hired a team faster than you could say startup. As I walked through the door, the first person to greet me wasn't Alex, but his new secretary, Lisa, a young woman with a bright smile. "Hi, you must be Jenna. Alex has told us so much about you," she said, her voice as polished as the apple she was polishing on her blouse. "Yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you, Lisa," I replied, my tone hiding the churn of discomfort in my stomach. I glanced around, taking in the rows of busy desks, the oversized motivational posters screaming, "Think big." It felt more like a Silicon Valley scene than a modest startup. Alex spotted me from his office and waved me in. He was leaning back in his chair like a CEO from some glossy magazine shoot, grinning from ear to ear. "Jen, what do you think? We're really kicking off here," he exclaimed as I entered. "It's impressive, Alex. But aren't you scaling up too fast?" I frowned, looking around at all the new equipment and employees. "Babe, to make money, you gotta spend money. We need the best to be the best," he replied, his voice filled with that irritating confidence that had started to grate on me. "But hiring so many people so quickly, the fancy office, the tech, how are we covering this?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. Alex strutted from his desk, sweeping his hand through the air as if brushing away my concerns. "Investments, Jen. You gotta spend big to catch the big fish. We're hosting a launch dinner next week, going to dazzle them with our vision." The dinner he was talking about turned out to be at one of the fanciest places in town. He'd even had glossy business cards made up, heavy and embossed with gold detailing, which he handed out to anyone who looked remotely interested in his pitch. Watching him work the room was like watching a play, every gesture calculated, every smile timed to perfection. As the evening wound down, I pulled him aside, my worry turning into frustration. "Alex, this isn't sustainable. We should be careful with expenses until we actually start earning." Alex's face hardened, his smile slipping away. "Jen, you really need to start seeing the bigger picture. This is how the successful do it. You think rich, you live rich, you become rich. That's the mindset we need. But real success doesn't just come from acting the part," I argued, feeling my temper rise. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "And what would you know about that? No offense, Jen, but I'm making something great here. Maybe try supporting me instead of dragging me down, huh?" That stung. More than I expected. I backed off, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Okay, Alex. Okay." From that night on, I stopped pushing back. I just helped out where I could, taking on tasks for the business in the evenings after my day job. It was clear that Alex didn't just want to create something lasting, he wanted the lifestyle, the status. A year into this grand venture of Alex's, the cracks in his ambitious facade had widened into gaping holes. The once bustling office was quieter now, the energy dimmed. Only a couple of tech specialists and Lisa, the secretary, were left. The rest had been let go one by one as the money drained like sand through fingers. I came home one evening to find Alex pacing in the living room, his face drawn, eyes flicking up to meet mine with a mix of defiance and desperation. "Jen, we need to pump more money into the business. It's just a tough phase, it'll pass." He started off before I could even set down my keys. I sighed, dropping my bag onto the couch. "Alex, we've been at this tough phase for over a year. How much more can we afford to lose? Maybe it's time to think about winding down." He rounded on me, his voice sharp and loud. "Quit? You just don't get it, do you? You're too comfortable being a slave to your paycheck, too scared to really live free." His words stung, slashing through the tense air between us. "A slave? Really, Alex? Is that what you think of me? Someone trying to keep us afloat while you play billionaire on borrowed dimes?" I shot back, anger flaring. He didn't respond, just stormed out of the room, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot. 6 months later, things hadn't improved. They'd gotten worse. One afternoon, I came home to find the driveway empty. He'd sold our family car, our only car, to fund another desperate attempt to save his sinking ship. He greeted me at the door with a sheepish look, almost like he knew he'd crossed a line. "Jen, I had to. We needed the cash. I'll get it back, I promise," he said quickly, as if rushing to fill the silence before I could react. I just shook my head, too tired to argue anymore. "Alex, where does it end? You sold our car without even talking to me about it. What's next?" He shrugged, a hollow, defeated gesture. "Whatever it takes." From then on, I pulled double duty. My paycheck covered our rent, the groceries, and every little expense in between while Alex's dreams sucked up everything else. Every night, I'd lie awake, the weight of our world on my shoulders, listening to the silence of the apartment. It was like living with a ghost, a shadow of the man I married. It was a sunny Tuesday morning when my phone rang. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was Judith, Alex's mom. The tremor in her voice when I answered set my heart racing. "Jenna, darling, I hate to bother you, but I've got these people here, these creditors, and they're talking about taking the house. They say Alex put it up as collateral." "What's going on?" I froze, the phone nearly slipping from my grasp. "What? No, that can't be right, Judith. Let me handle this. I'll call you back soon." I hung up, my mind spinning. Alex had promised no more risks after the car incident. I waited all day for him to come home, rehearsing what I would say, how I would stay calm. But when he walked through the door, looking tired and disheveled, all my plans fell apart. "Alex, did you mortgage your mom's house for a loan?" I blurted out, unable to contain my anxiety. He tossed his keys on the table, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, I did. We needed the cash flow to keep the business alive. It's going to pay off, Jen, you'll see." "How could you gamble with your mom's home?" I exclaimed, feeling my temper rise as my voice cracked with emotion. "It's not a big deal, Jen. This is how business works. You invest big, you win big. We're on the brink of something huge here," he argued, his voice firm, almost rehearsed. "But what about your mom? Where is she supposed to go?" My words were sharp, cutting through the air between us. Alex shrugged, a casual, heartless gesture that made me flinch. "She won't have to go anywhere. It's all legal stuff, nobody's going to throw an old lady out on the street. Plus, our state has mild winters, she'll manage if it comes to that." The ease with which he dismissed the gravity of the situation horrified me. That night, I couldn't sleep, tormented by the image of Judith, homeless because of us, because of a gamble Alex chose to take. The next morning, I made a decision. I went to my parents' house, seeking refuge and advice. My father, a seasoned investor who'd always been wary of Alex's rash decisions, greeted me with concern. "Jenna, what's wrong? You look troubled," he said, guiding me to the living room. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Dad, I need to borrow some money to pay off the loan on Judith's house. Alex put it up as collateral without telling anyone, and now it's at risk." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Jenna, I'll help because it's Judith, but you need to think hard about your marriage. Is this the life you want? Constantly cleaning up financial messes?" As I lay in bed at my parents' house that night, the reality of my father's words echoed in my mind. Alex had crossed a line, involving his own mother in his reckless schemes, showing a side of him I could hardly recognize. 3 days later, I returned home, my mind a chaotic mix of relief and unresolved tension. However, as I tried my key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. Confused and frustrated, I jiggled the key harder, thinking the lock was jammed. Nothing worked. With a sinking feeling, I dialed Alex's number, but it went straight to voicemail. With nowhere else to go, I headed to Judith's house, hoping to at least bring her some good news. I arrived at Judith's to find her pruning her rose bushes, the sun setting softly behind her. "Jenna, what a surprise, dear. Everything okay?" she called out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Hi, Judith. I have some news. My dad agreed to help with the loan. You won't lose the house," I said, managing a small smile. Her eyes welled up as she hurried over and enveloped me in a warm hug, her relief palpable. "Oh, Jenna, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're an angel." We were just stepping inside when the doorbell rang. Judith answered it, and there stood Alex, with Lisa clinging to his arm, smiling triumphantly. My heart froze. "Alex? What are you doing here?" I stammered, confusion and dread mingling in my chest. Alex's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Jenna, I see you've been busy. Unlike you, Lisa here supports me. In fact, she believes in me so much that we're together now. And oh, I filed for divorce. You're holding me back." Judith gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Alex, what?" "And there's more," Alex continued, pulling out some papers from his jacket. "I sold your apartment. Needed the money for the business. We'll be living here with Mom. You should find somewhere else to stay." The papers felt heavy in my hand. Divorce papers. Sale documents. My life, reduced to a few sheets of cold, legal prose. "You sold our home? How could you?" I whispered, my voice breaking. Lisa sneered, clinging tighter to Alex. "Because we're going places, Jenna. And you're just dead weight." Judith's face reddened with anger. She grabbed a nearby kitchen towel and attacked Alex and Lisa with it. "Get out. I'm ashamed of you, Alex. How dare you treat Jenna like this?" Alex and Lisa were screaming as they dodged Judith and the towel, and I was looking at this surreal scene with mixed feelings. As Judith was out of breath and stopped, Alex straightened his clothes and turned to a tearful Lisa with a wry grin. "Let's go. We don't need this." Before he could leave, Judith turned to me, her eyes fierce with resolve. "Jenna, dear, I'm signing this house over to you. You saved it. It's yours." Alex stopped in his tracks, his face a mask of disbelief. "Mom, you can't." "I can, and I will. Now get out. Take your friend and leave my house." The door slammed behind them, leaving a stunned silence. Judith turned to me, her expression softening. "Stay here, Jenna. As long as you need." After the betrayal and upheaval of the last few days, I was emotionally drained but determined to set things right. Following my father's advice, I met with a lawyer he recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Thompson. Over coffee in her stark, uncluttered office, we laid out the details of my case against Alex. "So, he sold the apartment without your consent?" Ms. Thompson asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "Yes, and probably forged my signature to do it," I replied, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief as I handed her the fraudulent documents. Ms. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "We'll take this to court. I'll file for the immediate reversal of the sale and push for a fraud charge." The legal wheels turned faster than I expected. In court, Alex's facade of competence crumbled under the weight of evidence. When confronted with the forgery, he had no defense. "Your Honor, I was just trying to save my business," Alex stammered, avoiding my gaze. The judge was unmoved. "You committed fraud, Mr. Carter. This court sentences you to probation and prohibits you from holding any senior management position in any company. Let this be a lesson in responsibility." Meanwhile, Judith, with Ms. Thompson's help, proved that Alex had taken the loan against her house without her knowledge or consent. The judge ordered Alex to compensate his mother for the emotional and financial distress caused. Outside the courtroom, as the final divorce proceedings took place, Alex's desperation was palpable. "Jenna, please, don't ask for any more money. I'm ruined," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, the man I once loved, now just a stranger driven by greed. "I don't want your money, Alex. But you will replace my car, the one you sold without asking me." A couple of months later, his business, now hopelessly in debt, crumbled without his mismanagement to sustain it. Lisa left as soon as the reality of his financial situation hit home. Alone and barred from any significant corporate role, Alex was a broken man. But that was no longer my concern. With the legal battles behind me, I returned to the apartment that was once again legally mine. One afternoon, as I arranged books on a new shelf, the doorbell rang. It was the delivery of the new car Alex had bought me, a sleek, reliable model that was everything the old one had been and more. I signed off on the paperwork, the final tie to my old life with Alex severed. After the whirlwind of betrayal and legal battles, life settled into a new, steadier rhythm. My days were filled with the familiar comforts of my job. Each project and code line I crafted at work reminded me why I had clung to this stability, why it was so crucial not to leap blindly into Alex's fantasies. My salary, once stretched to cover his debts, now afforded me small luxuries and peace of mind. Every so often, I caught snippets of Alex's new life. He was doing physical labor now, something vastly different from the suits and boardrooms he had aspired to dominate. It was hard work, paying off the mountains of debt he had accumulated through his reckless ambitions. I felt a twinge of something, pity, perhaps, or just relief, that it was no longer my disaster to manage. Despite everything, Judith and I remained close. Our bond, forged in the fire of Alex's deceit, had only strengthened. She often joked, "You got rid of the worst part of our family and kept the best," during our weekly coffee meetups. Her laughter was a balm to the still tender parts of my heart. One breezy Saturday afternoon, we sat in her garden, the late spring blooms a burst of color against the green. Judith had just come back from her lawyer's office, a stack of papers in hand. "Jenna, I've made it official," she said, handing me a document. "The house will be yours one day. Not that I'm planning on going anywhere anytime soon." I took the papers, a lump forming in my throat. "Judith, you don't have to do this. You've already given me so much." She waved me off, her voice firm but kind. "I want to, dear. You saved this old house, you saved me. It's only right." We spent the afternoon reminiscing and planning future renovations to the house, small projects we could tackle together. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, Judith leaned back in her chair, her eyes thoughtful. "You know, Jenna, I always thought it was the big, explosive moments that defined us. But it's not. It's the quiet days, the simple acts of kindness, the steady work. That's what really builds a life." Her words echoed in my heart as I drove home later. She was right. Life wasn't about the dramatic falls or the swift climbs, but about the steady, often unnoticed, day-to-day resilience. Back at my apartment, I looked around at the space that had once been a shared dream, now solely mine. It was quieter, simpler, less extravagant than Alex had wanted it to be, but it was real and it was mine. The next morning, as I prepared for work, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Grateful for the job that had sustained me, for Judith's unwavering support, and for the lessons learned. I was grateful, too, for my own strength, which had carried me through the storm and out the other side.